Wives of the prophets in Islam, wives of the prophets in Islam, wives of the prophets in Islam, wives of the prophets in Islam.
Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, wassalatu wassalamu ala Sayyidil Mursaleen, amma ba'd. فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الصلاة والسلام عليك يا رسول الله وعلى آلك وأصحابك يا حبيب الله الصلاة والسلام عليك يا نبي الله وعلى آلك وأصحابك يا نور الله. Dear viewers of Madani Channel, once again we welcome you in our new episode of our program Wives of the Prophets. Inshallah today we'll continue our discussion from where we left in our last episode. We were talking about the Queen Bilqees, and when Sayyidina Sulaiman alayhi salam sent a letter to Queen Bilqees through the woodpecker, and she also read it to her ministers who were there in her court. Now, inshallah we will talk about what was the reply of her ministers to whom she read that letter, and then what was the reply to them from Queen Bilqees thereafter, and how this discussion between Queen Bilqees and her courtiers, her ministers took place, how this is mentioned in the Holy Quran. We'll also cover that inshallah. But before that, let's first of all listen to the virtue of sending peace and salutations upon the noble Prophet sallallahu alaihi wa alihi wasallam. In one hadith, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wa alihi wasallam stated that he who sends salat upon me once, Allah Almighty showers 10 mercies upon him, and he who sends salat upon me 10 times, Allah Almighty showers 100 mercies upon him, and he who sends salawat upon me 100 times, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala inscribes between both his eyes that this person is free from hypocrisy and fire of hell, and on the day of judgment he'll be kept among martyrs. Sallu ala al-Habib sallallahu ala Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wasallam. So dear viewers of Madani Channel, now the letter from Sayyidina Sulaiman alayhi salam had reached Queen Bilqees. She'd read it, and she's also read it to her courtiers, to her ministers. Now when she read this letter to her ministers, she became attentive to them, and then she sought their advice on it, she sought their opinion on it. And this has been mentioned in verse number 32 of Surah Naml in these words.
قالت يا أيها الملأ أفتوني في أمري ما كنت قاطعة أمرا حتى تشهدون.
Translation from Kanzul Iman, she said, O chiefs, give me your opinion in this matter of mine. I do not take a final decision until you are present here with me. So this is how this has been mentioned in the Holy Quran, that what Queen Bilqees said to her ministers who were there in her court. Now under this verse, it has been stated that Queen Bilqees, she sought the opinion, she sought the advice of her courtiers, of her ministers, whilst carrying out a consultation with them, while consulting with them. And doing so has been the practice of the kings, has been a habit, a practice of the kings, that whenever they intend for something, or whenever they face any matter, any issue, then they seek advice, they seek the opinion of the wise and intellectual people of their kingdom, those who have some kind of political know-how, and whatever is beneficial for them, whatever they feel is correct for them, whatever they feel is right for them, then they act according to it. So this has been the practice of the kings, the habits of the kings. So Queen Bilqees was also a queen of very high dignity and awe. So she also carried out this consultation with her ministers and sought their advice, their opinion upon this letter of Sayyidina Sulaiman alayhi salam. Now, when Queen Bilqees, she read this letter of Sulaiman alayhi salam to her ministers, and when she sought their opinion Upon this, now what reply they gave to Queen Bilqees, this has been mentioned in the following verse, in verse number 33 of Surah Naml, in these words.
قالوا نحن أولو قوة وأولو بأس شديد والأمر إليك فانظري ماذا تأمرين.
Translation from Kanzul Iman, they said, we possess great strength and are great warriors, and the decision is yours, so think over what you will command. Now, by saying this, they meant that we possess power and we are capable of fighting a fierce war, a very, very tough war. We are capable of fighting it. So, by this, what they were referring to was that if you want us to fight them, meaning fight Sayyidina Sulaiman alayhi salam, then we are ready for it because we are powerful, we possess courage, we possess bravery, and we have a very large army, we have a huge army, and we are also experienced in war affairs. And the chiefs of our kingdom said that the decision of fighting them or reconciliating with them, it is upon you, it is up to you, whatever you want to do. And O Queen, contemplate, ponder upon it really good. And whatever you command us, we will obey you and we will await your decision. We will await your command. Now, in this statement of theirs, where they said to Queen Bilqees that whether you want to fight them or whether you want to reconciliate with them, it is up to you. Now, in this statement of theirs, they were alluding towards the fact, they were giving a hint to Queen Bilqees that they think that we should engage in war with them, we should fight them. This is what their own personal opinion was. However, they also made sure to Queen Bilqees that if you want to reconciliate with them, we will still obey you. But they themselves were more inclined towards fighting Sayyidina Sulaiman alayhi salam and his army. And the purpose behind this answer was that we are people of war, and giving you commands or giving you orders or giving you a solidified opinion is not something that we need to do. This is out of our domain. This is not what we are there for. So you yourself are a person of wisdom, a person of intellect. So whatever you decide, we will obey you. So this is what the dialogue was between Queen Bilqees and her ministers after she read out that letter to them and after she sought their advice, their opinion. This is what they said to Queen Bilqees. So they themselves were more inclined towards fighting Sayyidina Sulaiman alayhi salam and his army. However, they also made it clear to Queen Bilqees that if you want us to reconcile with them, you will find us obedient to you. We will obey as per your command. Now when Queen Bilqees saw that the chiefs of her kingdom are more inclined in fighting against Sulaiman alayhi salam, then she brought forth the consequences of fighting a war against Sayyidina Sulaiman alayhi salam and the dangers and threats that they could face because of it. Because Queen Bilqees, she was a person of wisdom, she was a lady of intellect, she was a queen of dignity and awe. So she brought forth all those elements, the consequences, the dangers, the threats that they could face because of fighting Sayyidina Sulaiman alayhi salam. Now how she brought their attention towards this fact, this has been mentioned in the following verse of Surah Naml, in verse number 34 of Surah Naml, in these words.
قالت إن الملوك إذا دخلوا قرية أفسدوها وجعلوا أعزة أهلها أذلة وكذلك يفعلون.
Translation from Kanzul Iman, she said, indeed the kings, when they enter a town, they destroy it and disgrace its honorable people, and this is how they do. So this is the reply that Queen Bilqees gives to her ministers of her kingdom. Now by this she meant that whenever a king enters any town or any kingdom with his power, then they destroy it. The king destroys it, and he kills, assassinates the honorable people of that very town, or he makes them imprisoned, he captivates them and degrades them, humiliates them, and this is the way of the kings. Now, since Queen Bilqees knew the practices and habits of the kings, that's why she said this. That's why she brought forth all the dangers and consequences of engaging in war with Sayyidina Sulaiman alayhi salam, and reiterated to her courtiers, to her ministers, that fighting a war against Sayyidina Sulaiman alayhi salam would not be appropriate. By doing this, there would be a great danger to the kingdom, to her country, to the kingdom in which they are residing. Because remember, dear viewers of Madani Channel, that through the letter of Sulaiman alayhi salam, Queen Bilqees had realized that this is not an ordinary king. She had realized that he is someone extraordinary. He is not an ordinary king. So having all these facts in her mind, she was communicating all these facts to the ministers of a kingdom and seeking their opinion so that they could make a decision, as in how should they respond to the letter of Sayyidina Sulaiman alayhi salam. Now, after bringing forth the consequences of the war in front of the ministers, Queen Bilqees, she gave her own opinion to them. She gave her own suggestion to them, which has been mentioned in verse number 35 of Surah Naml in these words.
وَإِنِّي مُرْسِلَةٌ إِلَيْهِمْ بِهَدِيَّةٍ فَنَاظِرَةٌ بِمَا يَرْجِعُ الْمُرْسَلُونَ. Translation from Kanzul Iman, and I am going to send a gift to them, then see what reply the envoys return with. Meaning that I'm about to send few presents, few gifts towards Sayyidina Sulaiman alayhi salam and his nation, and I will wait and see that what response my envoy, my bearer who takes gifts and presents to them, he returns with. Through this, we will find out and we'll come to know whether Sulaiman alayhi salam is a king or not. Because when it comes to the kings, who are only kings and not prophets, then they accept gifts and presents with great reverence. So, if he is only a king, then he will indeed accept our presents and our gifts. And if he is a prophet of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then he will not accept our gifts, our presents, and he will not be content upon anything else than us embracing faith upon him and following his religion. Now, this is what Queen Bilqees, she said to her ministers, the ministers of her kingdom, and you can see how intellectual she was, that she knew that if Sayyidina Sulaiman alayhi salam was a king, then he wouldn't accept the presents and gifts that she would send to him. And this was, in a way, the testing scale from her side to see whether Sulaiman alayhi salam was a king or just an ordinary king. And you can also see her intellectuality, her wisdom from the fact that as soon as she received the letter from Sulaiman alayhi salam, straight away she realized through the letter, through the writing of Sulaiman alayhi salam, that this is not the writing of an ordinary king. There's something special about this individual. And she straight away, in her mind, knew that Sayyidina Sulaiman alayhi salam, he could also be a prophet of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And now, after consulting with her ministers, this is how she brought forth her own opinion, that this is what I'm going to do to establish whether Sulaiman alayhi salam is king, or just a king, or he is a prophet as well. As kings, they accept gifts, but when it comes to a Nabi of Allah, a prophet of Allah, then he will not accept gifts from anyone. And all that, what they want, what they desire, is for us to be guided to the right path and to follow the religion that they have come up with. Sayyidina Abdullah ibn Abbas radiallahu anhuma, he has stated that when the letter of Sayyidina Sulaiman alayhi salam reached Queen Bilqees, then she consulted with her ministers and she sought their opinion, she sought their advice. And they gave their opinion to Queen Bilqees. And after they gave their opinion to Queen Bilqees, then she said that we will send gifts, presents towards Sayyidina Sulaiman alayhi salam. If he accepts those presents, then it would determine the fact, it would mean that he is a king, meaning only a king, not a prophet. Then we will fight against him, we will engage in a war against him.
And if he does not accept presents, does not accept gifts, then this would determine the fact, this would establish the fact that he is a prophet of Allah Almighty. In this case, we will not fight a war against him. Instead, we will obey him. We will embrace faith upon him. So, dear viewers of Madani Channel, we see how intellectual Queen Bilqees herself was, as she had determined that Sayyidina Sulaiman alayhi salam is not an ordinary individual, whereas the other ministers of her kingdom, they were unable to see the same fact as Queen Bilqees she had seen. And at the same time, she had also established, and she had also made an intention that if Sayyidina Sulaiman alayhi salam is the prophet of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then we will obey him. And if he's only a king, then we'll fight a war against him. The opinion, the advice that her ministers had given her. And what a beautiful way she came up with to find out whether Sulaiman alayhi salam was only a king or actually a prophet of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. As through her wisdom, she knew that kings, they accept gifts and presents from other people with great awe and dignity. Those were only kings and not prophet of Allah Almighty. But if a king is also a prophet of Allah Almighty, or any prophet of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they do not accept gifts and presents from other people. And this was a testing skill from Queen Bilqees, and hence she sent presents in the court of Sulaiman alayhi salam to decide whether to obey him or whether to fight against him. Now, what happens after this? We will insha'Allah cover that in our next episode. So make sure to join us again in our next episode to find out what happens next. Sallu ala al-Habib, sallallahu ala Muhammad, sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam.
Wives of the prophets in Islam, wives of the prophets in Islam, wives of the prophets in Islam, wives of the prophets in Islam.